Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The forgotten sister of King Henry VIII. Inside of Tudor England, there were many men and women who fought for supremacy inside the court of Henry VIII. But there was one woman who did not really need to, as she was the sister of the king. Mary Tudor was the younger daughter of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, who went to marry the French king, Louis XII, and at the time he was 30 years older than Mary. But Mary did live a very interesting life. She was the maternal grandmother of a woman who became the 9-day queen, Lady Jane Grey, and often today she is forgotten about when compared to her brother, Henry VIII, with the notorious Tudor King's antics and his wives. But what is the story of the life of Mary Tudor, the Queen of France? Mary was born on the 18th of March 1496, inside of Sheen Palace, with her father being King Henry VII and her mother being Elizabeth of York. She was the youngest child to survive infancy, and while she was 4, she was visited by Erasmus, who taught briefly inside of the royal nursery. When she was 6, she was given her own household, which was made up of staff of gentlewomen that served her and waited upon her, and also a doctor and a schoolmaster. She was given a brilliant education, and she learned many different languages, and also dancing and music. It was hoped that she would become married to a powerful European prince or king that would secure the safety of England through alliances. Her governess was Joan Faux, who was called Mother Guildford, and the pair were very close. But as a child, she, along with her brother, the future King Henry VIII, were very close, and they had a great relationship. In fact, Henry would call his first surviving child after her, in the future Queen Mary I, and when Mary was just 6, her mother died. But a number of bills paid to her apothecary between 1504 and 1509 show that at a time Mary Tudor was ill and not very well, but she was considered a beautiful European princess, and Erasmus stated that nature never formed anything more beautiful. She entertained guests during Philip I of Castile's royal visit, and she played music, and she was later betrothed to his son Charles, but this was then called off. Mary Tudor's first marriage would be negotiated as a consequence of a peace treaty between England and France. Cardinal Wolsey worked on this, and in this deal, Mary, at the age of 18, was forced to marry the 52-year-old French king Louis XII. The couple married at Abbeville, and she was sent to France with 4 maids of honour, who were English, and one of them, the future second wife of King Henry VIII, Anne Boleyn, and her principal lady-in-waiting was Joan Faux. Her marriage to Louis was not a happy one, and despite being married only 3 months, the French king died, reportedly, from his need to produce an heir, and his bedroom antics may have caused issues with his gout. But following the king's death, the French king tried to negotiate a second marriage for Mary, but she was very unhappy with her French marriage. Nonetheless, she had been a queen for a number of months, but at the time it's believed that she was in love with Charles Brandon, the first Duke of Suffolk. Henry VIII knew of the love she had for him, but the king wanted her to marry someone more powerful to secure an alliance. He previously allowed her to marry who she liked if she outlived the French king, but ultimately the king did not like the idea of Charles Brandon getting more valour at court. There were rumours across the continent that she would marry the Duke of Lorraine or the Duke of Savoy, and King Francis I even hoped he would possibly marry her following the death of his queen. But Mary was brought back to England by Charles Brandon, and he promised the king he would not marry her. But Mary persuaded Charles Brandon to ignore this, and the couple married in secret on the 3rd of March 1515, months after the king had dispatched him to get his sister. This was treason at the time, as Brandon married without the king's permission, and the king was incredibly angry. Many in the Privy Council called for his execution, but Thomas Wolsey intervened, and because of the king's affection for his sister, the pair were just fined heavily. Mary became Charles Brandon's 3rd wife, and he had 2 daughters by his 2nd wife, but Mary raised the girls as if they were her own. Mary was regarded at court as the Queen of France, and was not known as the Duchess of Suffolk, and she lived with Brandon at his elaborate estate in Suffolk. But issues did arise between Henry VIII and his sister when the king tried to annul his first marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Mary hated Anne Boleyn, the woman he was trying to divorce Catherine for, and the two had been embittered since she lived in France. There was one incident which occurred at court in 1532, and it was said, one of the chief gentlewomen in the service of the said Duke of Norfolk, with 20 followers, assaulted and killed in the sanctuary of Westminster Sir William Pennington, chief gentleman and kinsman of the Duke of Suffolk. In consequence of this, the whole court was in an uproar. It was believed that this argument that turned bloody was caused by Mary's comments about Anne Boleyn. But throughout her life, Mary, as mentioned, did suffer from bouts of illness and poor health. She required treatment from physicians and doctors regularly, and at the age of 37, which was not too old, she died at Westhorpe Hall in Suffolk. She had contracted sweating sickness 5 years earlier, and had suffered very badly, and it's believed that this could have been involved in her death. Other historians have considered that she may have suffered from cancer, angina, tuberculosis, or appendicitis. But as she was an English princess and the daughter of a king, and the sister of the current King Henry VIII, as well as a Dowager Queen of France, her funeral was considered very expensive and was in keeping with a royal funeral. A mass was held at Westminster, and her body was embalmed, and was then held in state for 3 weeks where she died. But the funeral procession was huge, and it included 100 torchbearers and a clergy member who carried the cross. Her coffin was carried on a hearse pulled by 6 horses, and at the funeral her stepdaughters Mary and Anne pushed to be at the front as the coffin was lowered into the crypt of Bury St Edmunds Abbey, where she was buried. Her body would later be moved following the dissolution of the monasteries, and she was placed inside St Mary's Church in Bury St Edmunds. But in the 18th century, her remains were desecrated, as her coffin was dug up and opened, and a lock of her hair was taken by several people. But Mary Tudor was the sister of King Henry VIII, who was considered a beautiful woman of the 16th century. Henry VIII got on very well with his sister, but she did not like many of his choices, including his decision to annul his first wife. She had 4 children with Charles, and was outlived by them, and today she is considered a forgotten Tudor figure. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.